Recently, Trump had a press conference, and guys, we really need to talk about it. If you watched it live, you know exactly what I mean. You didn't see a confident leader winning a war. You saw a superpower realizing it's in deep, deep trouble. We are bringing you the unfiltered reality today, because the mainstream narrative is cracking wide open. Operation Epic Fury is falling apart in real time. The United States is bleeding money at a historic rate, and its allies are completely ghosting Washington. What we saw on that stage wasn't a master plan to secure victory. It was a lot of contradictions, bizarre historical revisionism, and wild excuses. The US is facing a heavy defeat, and the global financial markets are about to pay the price. Let's break down exactly what happened piece by piece. Let's start with the absolute disaster happening in the Strait of Hormuz, because this is where the American economy is taking the heaviest hit. Iran has basically locked the entire waterway down. This operation was supposed to degrade their stockpiles, and Central Command is out there boasting that they've hit over 6,000 targets and destroyed over 100 Iranian naval vessels. But none of that actually matters when the shipping lanes are closed. Iran is using mines, and more importantly, they have just launched their new solid-fuel Sejjil missiles for the first time. For those who don't know, solid-fuel missiles are a nightmare to track. They can be fired almost instantly, making them incredibly hard to detect and intercept. Because of this constant threat, the strait is blocked, and the global energy market is panicking. Brent crude oil has already surged well above $100 a barrel. The oil industry is actively warning the Wall Street Journal that this energy crisis is going to get significantly worse. In fact, Putin's special envoy, Kirill Dmitriev, is publicly predicting that oil will hit $150 a barrel in just the next 2 to 3 weeks. Think about what that means for the US consumer. That kind of price spike will trigger massive inflation and crush the American market. The ripple effects are already happening. The UAE had to suspend all oil loading operations at the massive Fujairah port after a huge Iranian drone strike sparked a massive fire. Emirates, the biggest airline in the Middle East, is barely managing to fly, operating on a heavily reduced schedule just to get in and out of Dubai. The US ambassador to the UN is out there complaining that Iran is trying to blackmail the global economy. But complaining doesn't lower gas prices. And speaking of costs, the financial burden of this war is out of control. The US has already spent an estimated $21 billion on Operation Epic Fury since it started roughly 3 weeks ago. $21 billion burned, just to have the most important oil choke point on the planet shut down. So how did the president address this massive economic and military disaster during the press conference? He stood up there and literally said he saw it coming. He claimed, and I quote, "I predicted all of it. I predicted Osama bin Laden would knock out the World Trade Center. I made that prediction a year before he did it." Setting aside the absolute craziness of flexing a debunked 9/11 prediction right now, think about what he is actually admitting to the world. He is admitting he knew Iran would successfully weaponize the Strait of Hormuz and choke off the world's oil supply. If he knew that was going to happen, why on earth did we launch this massive military operation without a foolproof plan to keep the shipping lanes open? You do not get credit for predicting a disaster that you literally walked the military right into. Trump said he isn't ready to declare victory, claiming Iran is decimated, but a decimated enemy doesn't hold the global economy hostage. Because the air and naval campaign isn't working, the administration is now looking at desperate measures. Axios is reporting that Trump is considering an operation to put boots on the ground to seize Iran's strategic oil depot on Karg Island. Let that sink in. Putting American ground troops on an Iranian island right now would be a massive, bloody escalation. It proves the air superiority they keep talking about is failing. In fact, we know it's failing because Iran retaliated with a confirmed hit on a U.S. Navy vessel. We have 13 U.S. service members confirmed dead. We have American citizens like 61-year-old Kamran Hekmati detained with tensions rising over their fate. The human and financial cost is staggering, and a ground invasion would multiply it overnight. And that leads to the most unhinged and contradictory part of the entire press conference. The U.S. is hurting. They are fighting this $21 billion war completely alone. So Trump actually stood at the podium and asked for help. He broke down the numbers, pointing out that the U.S. gets less than 1% of its oil from the strait. He said some countries get way more, citing Japan at 95%, China at 90%, and South Korea at 35%. He then explicitly said, "We want them to come and help us with the Strait of Hormuz." Think about how insane this is geopolitically. The United States unilaterally launched this massive operation around February 28th, got completely bogged down, and is now asking China, its biggest geopolitical and economic rival, to bring its Navy over and bail us out. He literally expects Beijing to secure the sea lanes because the US Navy can't. But literally, seconds later, in the exact same press conference, he completely contradicted himself. He aggressively pivoted and said, "We don't need anybody. We're the strongest nation in the world. We have the strongest military by far in the world. Guys, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot beg foreign countries to save the global economy from a crisis you started and then beat your chest saying you don't need anyone's help. This kind of whiplash messaging is exactly why absolutely no one is rushing to help us. And speaking of help, our actual traditional allies are nowhere to be found. They have completely abandoned the United States. Trump complained that the U.S. helped NATO with Ukraine, so NATO should help the U.S. with Iran. He even told the Financial Times that NATO faces a very bad future if allies don't help the U.S. But threats aren't working. Not a single country has publicly agreed to send warships. When a reporter asked Trump about working with French President Emmanuel Macron to build a coalition, Trump gave a bizarre answer. He said, "Yeah, I have spoken to him. He's been, on a scale of 0 to 10, I'd say he's been an 8. Not perfect, but it's France." I'm sorry, but rating world leaders out of 10 isn't going to get French destroyers into the Persian Gulf. An 8 out of 10 from France means they are staying home. Meanwhile, Germany is a hard 0. Their foreign minister flat out denied support, publicly stating, "Don't expect us to get involved in this war against Iran. We may talk with Iran regarding the Strait of Hormuz, but we can't attack Iran." They even added, "This is not our war, and we didn't start it." And that is a brutal rejection. The UK is out too. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made it clear the UK will not be dragged into this war. Australia specifically said they will not send naval ships. Switzerland, Japan, Italy, and Greece have all ruled out military involvement or pulled back their support. The coalition is dead. Trump tried to brush off this total European abandonment by saying, "Putin fears us. He has no fear of Europe whatsoever." But Europe isn't trying to scare Putin right now. They are just desperately trying to stay out of a disastrous American war that is driving up their energy costs. But probably the absolute craziest part of the briefing was the excuse the administration gave for all the terrible news. The Pentagon has had a nightmare few weeks. The targeting errors have been catastrophic. U.S. forces hit the Sejjil Tayyebe girls' school in Minab. 170 people, mostly young girls, were killed. Iran is now saying another children's school was struck by a U.S. and Israeli missile. The United Nations is heavily condemning the U.S., and Russia is aggressively demanding international accountability for the strike on the girls' school. It is a complete moral collapse. Faced with this horrific reality, Trump blamed artificial intelligence. He called Iran a country based on disinformation and claimed they are using disinformation plus AI to fake the news. He said, "They showed all sorts of things happening in the last 2 weeks that never happened." Look, we all know deepfakes are real. We've all seen the weird Coffeegate rumors and the unverified strike videos going around, online fueling global unease. But you cannot just use AI as a magic wand to wave away reality. The 170 dead girls in that school are not deepfakes. The massive fires at the Fujairah port are not AI. The $21 billion we have spent is real American taxpayer money. By blaming AI, the administration is basically demanding that the world ignore reality just because the truth makes them look like they are losing. While the U.S. argues over what is AI and what is real, things for our allies in the Middle East are getting incredibly dangerous. This whole Epic Fury operation was supposed to protect the region and secure Israel from Iranian proxies. Instead, the domestic situation in Israel is completely melting down. There is absolute chaos reported in Tel Aviv right now. Massive crowds are demanding the immediate resignation of the government. Protests are growing rapidly as shortages of basic goods hit the shelves and domestic instability spikes. The people are furious. And globally, there is a massive shift happening. As Israel claims to act in the name of Jews while leading its people into this horrific crisis, a powerful sentiment is spreading worldwide that the world must remember Israel does not represent Judaism. And physical security is failing too. Just today, a massive fire broke out following a heavy Hezbollah missile strike in the northern city of Nahariya. The U.S. strikes haven't made Israel safer. They've just kicked a hornet's nest. And how did Trump address this during the press conference? He basically predicted their absolute destruction on live television. He casually said, "Israel will go first, without question. And they'll certainly take a shot at us." Why are we fighting this multi-billion-dollar war if the president genuinely believes our closest regional ally is going to be wiped out anyway? It makes absolutely no strategic sense. No wonder a top Iranian commander recently stated that regional nations must know the U.S. cannot and will no longer be able to provide them with security. It is becoming impossible to argue with that logic. Finally, we have to talk about Russia. While the U.S. is failing to get NATO on board and begging China for help, Moscow is having an absolute field day. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov totally mocked the United States, reminding everyone of the initial American arrogance. He said the U.S. believed Iran could be defeated in a day with unprovoked aggression, adding, "I believe these people now understand how mistaken they were." It is a brutal insult, highlighting how badly the Pentagon miscalculated this 3-week quagmire. But Russia isn't just mocking the military failure. They are actively rewriting the narrative of why the war is happening at all. Moscow is officially telling the world that this isn't about nuclear programs or security. It is a pure oil grab. The Russian government stated they just want to get their energy source, like they do from Latin America, the Caribbean, the Persian Gulf, and other parts of our planet. And honestly, when you are dropping bombs, causing massive civilian casualties at schools, considering sending ground troops to an oil depot island, and demanding control of the shipping lanes, a huge portion of the globe is going to believe Russia's version of the story. The US has completely lost the information war. So, where are we at right now? Operation Epic Fury is a historic failure. The United States has spent $21 billion to get its own ships hit, isolate itself from every major Western ally, and push global oil prices toward an absolute crisis point that will crush the American economy. The administration clearly has no exit strategy. They are simultaneously begging Asian rivals for naval help, while bragging about being invincible, and they are blaming artificial intelligence for their own catastrophic military mistakes. The era of the United States unconditionally controlling the Middle East and dictating global security is ending right in front of our eyes. This is what a heavy defeat looks like. I'll keep bringing you the unfiltered reality as this crisis continues to unfold. Stay smart, watch the markets, and I'll see you in the next one.